Oh, God, it did.
Yeah, everyone, you have to remember to use your microphones tonight. You knew Mrs. House.
There's my glasses.
It's the buzz.
Look at that.
I don't hear it. It's because I'm deaf.
You don't.
I have this eternal whispering in my head. That's not.
It sounds like the radio's not. There's no station. Oh, I hear it.
Okay, let's do it. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to beautiful downtown Grand Forks. This is the Grand Forks City Council's Committee of the Whole for Monday, April 24th, 2023. Under item 1, call to order 1.1. We welcome the roll call.
Okay, Weigel.
Here.
Saltzky. Here. Lever.
Here.
Lansky. Here. Cavani. Sandy.
Here.
Dean.
Here.
Ford.
Great. Under item 2, updates and informational items 2.1, legislative update. Mr. Bergstrom.
Yes, thank you, Council President Sandy, members of council. The North Dakota legislature, today is day 70 of their 80-day session. They're hoping to save a few days for the interim in case they need to go into session. So there's some anticipation that the legislature may adjourn this week, maybe. If it's not this week, it'll be early next week. So with those remaining days, lots of things are in conference committee right now. I will say this, since the last time I talked to you, the Senate did vote to end the defined benefit pension plan for new employees after the beginning of 2025. That is on the House floor, or was scheduled to be in the House floor to concur or not concur with it. If it's not concurred with, which is we encourage our legislators to do so, go to conference committee to be talked about some more. But if it is concurred, that would become state law in August. That does include a study to take a look at pension plans in general. If they want to move forward, with their date being 2025, I suppose there is a chance that a study could come back and they can make their changes. But that is, we're not hearing a lot of that out of Bismarck. Also in conference committee, Senate Bill 2330, which is the infrastructure, is the legacy, it's the legacy investment fund. In that is funding for the infrastructure revolving loan fund. At one point, they took that language out, which we voiced our concern with. They put $150 million back into that. That should work out pretty well. In conference committee, though, they are having discussions of the limit that a political subdivision can borrow. Right now, it's at 40 million. That is, I heard from North Dakota League of Cities over the weekend, and they said that is one thing they are discussing moving forward. They won't back up, but moving forward. And then I should mention for the Department of Commerce got put into, thank you to Senator Meyer, $250,000 towards the Grand Forks Air Force Base for base retention. There's $1 million total for the state, $500,000 for Minot, $250,000 for Fargo, and $250,000 for Grand Forks. So that was actually taken out of 1.2, and that got put back in there. $250,000 for Grand Forks. Other than that, Chairman Weber, or I'm open to any other questions.
Generally, good news around the Red River Valley Water Supply Project. This has been an important priority for the city for years. Otherwise, a rough session for local subs.
Yeah, political subs are having a tough one, but yes, Red River Valley Water Supply is other good. Council Member Veen, we're doing all right in that one.
Well, we did okay.
We did okay.
Not good, no matter what. The 2330 is good for one biennium. Sorry, the 2330 is good for one biennium, but it isn't the long-term solution. It lasts the long-term solution.
That is correct. That's correct.
I was looking for some silver lining.
Any other questions from Mr. Bergstrom? Thank you very much.
Thank you
for the great report. Item 2.2, Fufang update. Mr. Gossett.
Thank you, members of the committee of the whole. I'll just go through some of the things that have transpired. As you know, we entered into that standstill agreement. That was an attempt to try to resolve any issues with Fufang that didn't turn out. A couple of things to point out is that the effective date on that standstill agreement, which meant nobody would take any action under it, was the earlier of June 13th of 2013, which was that 90-day period of time. or the date the parties had determined that they couldn't resolve it. But notwithstanding, there was a provision that if we got the non-extension notice from the bank with respect to the letter of credit, that the standstill agreement would terminate. We did get the non-extension document from the bank. That was dated April 18th of 2023. It was received by FedEx midday, as I understand it, on April 19th of 2023. The letter of credit does remain in effect until June 24th of 2023, notwithstanding the non-extension. If you recall, the letter of credit automatically renewed each June 24th on an annual basis, unless the bank sent out that non-renewal or non-extension notice, and that had to be received at least 60 days in advance of that June 24th date. Obviously, it did send out that non-extension, so it won't renew it past June 24th, 2023, but it still remains effective. Upon receipt of after receiving the non-renewal notice, we sent out the termination notice to Fufang terminating the development agreement. That was the last procedure that needed to be done to terminate the development agreement. So that's been sent out. It was delivered by certified mail, which is what was required under the development agreement as far as notices are concerned. And their attorney also requested that he receive a copy of it, so we did that as well. On that same day, we then sent the what's called the site draft or demand on the letter of credit. That was sent out on April 20th, 2023. It was sent both by email and kind of old school by facsimile, because that's one of the processes that could be done. Kind of a belts and suspenders. We didn't have to do both, but we were duplicative in how we sent that out. One of the things I want to point out is that it says that except in the letter of credit, except as for the documents described in the letter of credit, no other documentation or action shall be required for or in connection with the beneficiary's drawing and demand under this letter of credit. The issuer, who is the bank, is authorized to accept and shall accept any such statement delivered to it by beneficiary hereunder as binding and correct without investigation and responsibility for the accuracy, veracity, conclusory, correctness, or validity of the same for any part thereof. So they don't really, aren't supposed to look into the reasoning or anything like that. The letter of credit. So we've got the demand. They have 7 days to respond, 7 business days to respond to that request. So also as part of the letter of credit, the demand, we were supposed to make actually contact representatives of the bank to ensure that they received it. Marie Storstead did that and understand that she did communicate with them, and they did receive the demand. So we're waiting for a responsive document from the bank at this point. Another item that I do want to bring to your attention is, as you're aware, the matter with respect to the petition to put this to a citywide vote is still up on appeal at the North Dakota Supreme Court. If you recall, the district court upheld the decision not to put it to a citywide vote, and that was then ultimately appealed. After the decision was made to end the Fufang project, our attorneys then filed a motion to dismiss the appeal on the theory that it was moot. Project at that, even though we were in the standstill, the project wasn't going to go forward either through resolution or we didn't resolve it. We terminated. The petitioners opposed that motion, and on March 31st filed an opposition to continue to the appeal for a vote. Last week, after we sent all the documents with respect to the termination and the demand, our attorneys then filed a supplemental filing to the North Dakota Supreme Court to provide them all the documentations with respect to the standstill. We sent the standstill agreement, the non-renewal document, the termination notice, and the demand to the bank on the letter of credit. We're waiting to hear back from the North Dakota Supreme Court as to whether they've dismissed the appeal or not. But in the interim, the substantive brief by the city is due May 1st. they got an extension, to see what would happen with the motion to dismiss. But that, unless the Supreme Court rules on the mootness issue, our brief is due May 1st of 2023. And as of today, oral argument is scheduled for May 25th at 1:30 p.m. via Zoom before the North Dakota Supreme Court on that appeal. So, do you have any questions?
Questions for Mr. Gossett, Mr. Weber?
You mentioned termination of the development agreement. Implicit in that is termination of the standstill agreement.
The standstill agreement terminated by virtue of the fact that he got the non-extension from the bank. That was a term of the standstill agreement that if we got that, it would automatically terminate the standstill.
Very good, thanks.
Justin, so the way you explained it, who actually terminated the agreement? Did Bupa?
Nope, the city council directed, you voted on February 6th. We then brought it to your attention with respect to, they wanted to try to negotiate this, and procedurally, a notice had to be sent out for the termination.
Okay, yeah, because I was wondering with this non-extension or the non-renewal, I thought, I was trying to interpret how you were explaining that when they didn't do that renewal, that didn't automatically terminate.
Correct. That terminated the standstill agreement.
That just stands still.
Correct.
So the original termination from the city is what was enacted. And so they still could come back and challenge us.
Who challenged?
That challenge the city?
Sure.
Now,
Yep.
in court at some point in time.
Sure.
That would be the potential, it's either over or they challenge us.
Correct. I'm defending the city on a contract was dated back in the year 2000 right now.
Mr. Weber?
And if that were to come to court, what court would that have occur?
I believe in Grand Forks District Court. Or, there's an alternative. There's a possibility they could bring it in federal district court in Fargo.
Thanks.
Other questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Gossett. Moving right along, discussion item 3.1. Project 8657 sole source purchase upgrade of the elevator for City Hall. Ms. Collins.
Yes, President Sandy, council members, I am here to request a sole source bid, and we have the bid in front of you from Otis Elevator. Because we're upgrading the elevator, it's just logical that we would want the same company. It could be very confusing and very complicated if we went with another company.
Questions or concerns? Moved by Dean. Is there a second? Second by Osowski. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank
Thank you. 3.2 bid award for project 8640 District 773 reconstruction of South 20th Street from 17th to 20th Avenue South. Mr. Gresser.
Thank you, Council President Sandy, members of the Committee of the Whole. Bid award for South 20th Street. The bids are going to be open this week on April 27th. And we will bring those bids directly to the City Council. So we don't have any bids actually in hand yet today.
Motion to move this forward to council by Weber, second by Weigel. Any comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. 3.3 cost participation maintenance agreement, project 8466, 32nd Avenue South rehab from I-29 to South Washington. Mr. Gresser.
You guys should be pretty familiar with these already. I mean, we bring them in about just about once a cycle here. Cost participation maintenance agreement against standard document from the DOT on projects that they lead. This is for the, again, 32nd Avenue South, which is greatly in need of the work. Actually, the bid date for the project is set for May 12th, assuming we approve the document tonight. I'm just going to note that this is actually an accelerated from what it was originally going to be. Was originally set up to be a 2025 project. They accelerated up to 2023. Shout out to Jesse Cadamus of the DOT that really accelerated that project even before we knew of all the pothole situations that are there today. That's all I have. This was originally set up, request by the city council in November of 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Grasser. Yes, Mr.
I'll
Weber.
I'll move approval, then I have the question.
Moved by Weber. Is there a second by Linsky? Okay, Mr. Weber.
Only because you mentioned them, potholes. Is this a particularly bad year for potholes? Can you talk about potholes for a moment?
I don't know if it's particularly worse than any other. 32nd is a particularly bad stretch. Partially because of the age and the construction technique. They put the original concrete went down on clay, or it was actually lime treated base, a lot of it, but it's on clay. So now what happens when the frost comes out of the ground, the frost, because it can't migrate very easily through the clay and traffic hits it, a lot of that moisture from the frost comes up through the cracks. In the meantime, it snows and rains, so we get moisture from the top down. And so those holes there are basically wet all of the time, and they refreeze very often. So, that particular construction technique, we don't use that technique on larger roads like this anymore, partially because of that. Get a layer of gravel and stuff under there, at least helps keep that frost from coming up through the pavement. So, given the amount of traffic that's going on there and the construction techniques, it's very disappointed we only got 10 years life out of that thing, but it is what it is.
Other questions or comments, Mr.
Right,
Grasser? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Grasser. Item 3.4, Public Works Street Maintenance Division Loader Mounted Snow Blower Bid 2023-3. Ms. Litch.
Good evening, President Sandy and council members. The item before you is for 2 snow blowers for the streets division. The last 2 winters have been really tough to keep all of the necessary snow blowers up and running. In fact, one of them has not ran at all this past season and most of last season. And after meeting with Mr. Phelan and Maureen to talk about how we could move forward with funding a couple of snow blowers, the decision was made to bid this item out just to see what the prices would come back as. And it was decided that we should move forward and make a request to council to purchase 2 snow blowers for the street division. If we order them now, we will hopefully have them before the start of the next season. How we're going to fund these is from the Senate Bill 2183 projected funds that we should be receiving. I did include those reports in your packet. I have submitted the early season snow removal request to the state. So we are anticipating that to be somewhere in the amount of $243,000. And our estimated second request that will go in by the end of May will be roughly around $218,000, but more than likely more than that, because the latest snow event is not included in that. We will also use funds received from the potential sale of a 2001 Simline tar kettle and a 2009 Durapatcher. This staff report also includes selling the 2 snow blowers that we would be replacing the 2 new ones with.
Questions from Ms. Litch?
Move approval.
Mr. Weber, Ms. Sosky, seconds. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 3.5. City of Grand Forks Stormwater Management Plan. Ms. Barbie. Evening.
Good evening. Tonight, myself and Mr. Grasser are presenting the City of Grand Forks Stormwater Management Plan. This is an informational item only. This is a plan that was put together over the last year. It's been compiled actually over years, but we formalized it after we had a meeting with North Dakota Department of Environmental Quality to put together all those ideas. This management plan also addressed the need to develop a maintenance agreement. So we worked with the city attorney's office, the city engineering department to be able to draft the maintenance agreement. That's included with the document as well tonight. That will allow us the opportunity to operate and maintain any of the private infrastructure or work with landowners if they're not currently maintaining privately owned infrastructure that goes to the city stormwater system.
I think this is basically moving ahead with, we've talked about the stormwater regulations for a number of years. The MS4 permit is the permit that actually it comes into play. And the DOT or DEQ is getting a little more involved with enforcing all the particulars of that document. So we're going to be doing some more of that. You may get some phone calls even this year. There's some things that we're going to have to be implementing on, especially on some of the construction side of the world, and the inspections on some of the older privately owned facilities that we just haven't had to do before, but that's part of our compliance with the basic permit.
Comments, thoughts, questions? Nobody cares.
Oh, we care.
It's yes, it's receive and file. Thank you so much for all your hard work on the stormwater mitigation.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Item 3.6, water intake improvements for zebra mussel mitigation. Ms. Parker.
Thank you. This item has become before you tonight as we continue to look at mitigating zebra mussels at our raw water intake. We know that they're present in the Red River. We know that they're present on the screens that are at the intake, and we have been treating them on the suction side of the pumps, on the intake pumps, since 2020. This project is to approve the task order for the engineering services to get us a better permanent solution. We temporarily put in a treatment system that we need to provide a spill containment for, and a more robust piping system to that intake area where we're treating the zebra mussels.
Questions, comments, Mr. Dean?
Have the numbers been pretty consistent, or are they continuing to increase as far as numbers, or how would you rate the issue?
We're not counting them. We're just seeing, the impact of them enough to have concerns about doing a mitigation strategy. I don't know that they've really increased. It's just, we've noticed them continue to be persistent. And so we don't want to get to the point where they're causing some issues with us being able to provide that water through the screens and through that intake pipe. So it's being proactive in that sense.
Great, Mr. Weber.
I like when water comes out of my tap at home and you need water to treat, and so I'll move approval.
Great. Motion by Weber, second. Sorry, Kwame Sowski, thank you. Any other comments or thoughts? Hearing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 3.7, reaffirm the city cost share for, I think that's supposed to be scoping.
Yeah.
Engineering services project 8658 EGFGF Red River Crossing. Mr. Phelan.
Yeah. Council President Sandy and members of the committee, Council President Sandy pointed out a good point is that you approved a few months ago that we would share the cost 25%. East Grand Forks, as you recall, came to you and wanted a 50-50 cost share. Our city council asked for a 25% cost share because there were two bridge locations, one in the inner city part, one in the as a bypass bridge. Both bridges are actually in the county, and only one of the bridges is in the two cities, ironically enough. But with that being said, I would move forward with Grand Forks County, and they did approve the 25% cost share. Our counterparts in the city of East Grand Forks followed up with Polk County, and I think their sense says, we shouldn't have to pay the whole 25%, as much as you can tell from the meeting minutes and recommendations. So they approved up to $20,000. And my understanding from Mr. Murphy is that the East Grand Forks covered the difference between that 20 and 37,000 plus dollars. And so East Grand Forks, I guess, instead of going back to Asphalt County for the additional amount, they determined that we'll just pay the remaining cost share. And that's kind of how we got the breakdown that we have today. And as Mr. Krenko updated you last week at the city council meeting, SRF and the team have already started working on that. But I think it was a good reminder that to bring this back to demonstrate what the current cost shares are. And I think, Mr. Sandy, what I heard from you is this is kind of a small hurdle we're getting over. There's going to be some bigger hurdles about how we're going to cost share. And at some point, we want to make sure that we're all paying our fair share because the the investment is only going to get larger and larger. So it's in front of you. As we talked a lot about this is really just to figure out what we have on both locations, look for opportunities for us for funding. In the next phase of the funding will not be design, won't be construction, it'll be planning. But as you recall, what SRF said during our joint meeting with East Grand Forks City Council is now in this new federal highway bill, there is money for planning, which is unique this 5 years. So really what our goal as administration is to get this to a point where SRF can help us with some planning cost shares on both locations or one of the locations. I think the other thing I heard is that we have to figure out how they play off one another and maybe what should be the higher priority as we move forward. And so that work has begun. So if any questions, Al and I are here to answer any of those questions.
Questions?
Make a comment.
Mr. Weber, comment?
On January 27th, President Sandy, you made the motion, I seconded it to move forward with this study. The letter of of our motion was that it was 25, 25, 25, 25. I think the spirit was that we would put forward our quarter if there was adequate participation by the others. What happened on that side of the river? Do we want to hold them to the letter of the law? Are we willing to go along with the spirit of our motion? And for me, the spirit of our motion, the motion that I seconded was that we would pay our share. We wanted others to pay their share. By the letter of the motion, that did not happen. You're right. By the spirit of the motion, I think that has gone forward, and it would be poor form for us at this point to pull our 25% out and not move forward with this information gathering stage. For that reason, I'll move approval.
If there's a motion by Weber, is there a second? Second by Lunsky. Further comments?
Just a quick comment.
Mr. Connie.
We had discussed a couple times now about studying Phoenix and the safety and traffic study around the school. And I'm just curious where that is in the process.
You can speak to that.
Great.
Or would you like to?
Go right ahead.
So they compiled all their information last Tuesday. They had their drones fly. They put up cameras all last week. In about 3 weeks, they're meeting with the neighborhood to gather more information. So that they have started.
Awesome. Great. Thank you.
It is great. I think as most people that pay attention to local politics, they recognize that Polk County, it's not really very easy to get any information. They don't, to the best of my knowledge, they don't broadcast their meetings. Their meeting minutes related to this issue was one sentence. And so I have no idea what the nuance was. And although I've asked the questions, haven't gotten any sort of a response indicating how the discussion actually went with the Polk County commissioners at their meeting. I'm not necessarily saying we shouldn't move forward, because you're right, Mr. Weber, the spirit of this was we would participate and pay our fair share. But I mean, in actuality, the Polk County commissioners, as far as I'm concerned, they totally thumb their nose at us on what I believe is one of the most important issues that we're currently dealing with in our greater communities. And when the local representatives of the city of East Grand Forks are actively in St. Paul trying to get funding for bridges, and their county doesn't really seem to care, to me, it's a disconnect. And so if you got a motion on the floor and if other people want to support it and want to move forward, fine. I think this is a bigger issue than this vote. I think Polk County is sending a very clear message that they're really not interested in participating on whatever we're interested in talking about related to bridges. So I don't know. I think, you know, more than this study, perhaps we should actually have a meeting with Polk County Commissioners and talk about what their actual intentions are, because if we get to the point where they're only in for 20% of the 50% over there, if they're not all in, we've got bigger problems. So, yeah, I'm not sure what to make of it, and when you can't get any answers from people, I don't know how to formulate a reasonable opinion. Mr. Weber?
If I may, it's hard for me to disagree with what you said. At the same time, we know that city government and county government, they don't always get along. There's those kinds of tensions. Our counterpart is not Polk County. Our counterpart is the East Grand Forks City Council. And they stepped up, in fairness. They stepped up to deal with that deficit. What does it mean long-term? I'd prefer to leave that to that side of the river for them to work out. And so that everyone.
Council President Sandy, I think you had a good point. I understand, Mr. Murphy's last day was he's East Grand Forks. His last day was last Friday. So we'll have to probably step up as Grand Forks to keep moving this forward. But they did want a foursome for a meeting, both counties and both cities to have a meeting. So we will plan that in the near future when there's enough information with our consultant to have an engaged conversation. So I think at least what I heard from Mr. Murphy is a whole county did want a joint meeting with all four entities.
That'd be great. Any other discussion? There's a motion and second on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Under item 4, city council member matters for discussion, Mr. Weigel, anything for good of the order?
No, thank you, sir.
Ms. Osowski,
No, thank you, sir.
Mr. Weber. I'm sorry, Ms. Munson. Mr. Bean, Mr. Kamali,
No, thank you.
Mr. Weber.
Thank you, President Sandy. I think that it's time for us to have a discussion about citizen comments. For most of the first 10 years that I was on council, we allowed 3-minute citizen comments. And we generally didn't have a clock. We rarely cut people off. We let them have their say. And then more recently, we had a market change in citizen comments. And so we reviewed policies around that. And that review of policies included a finding that Grand Forks actually had the most open, progressive citizen comment policy in the state among municipal governments. And so at that time, we actually expanded our citizen comment from 3 minutes to 5 minutes. And yet, I think that policy, which we probably passed about a year ago, it's probably time for us to review that again. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. I'm glad you mentioned that. I've actually been thinking, I was contacted by several different people immediately after Monday night's meeting and then the days after. And most of it was jovial. Some of it was very serious. And several people asked me very directly why we continue to allow public comment at all when we don't have to. There are cities in North Dakota that don't have public comment. I'm not interested, I personally am not interested in eliminating public comment, but I do think that we need to, there should be a level of decorum for all of us, including the people that want to get up and speak, because it isn't their meeting. This is our meeting. It's the citizens meeting, but that's the citizenry in general, not the citizenry specific people. And so I think we need to set a standard of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable during public comments. I certainly think, and it's very tough because we're all put in a very difficult position because when someone stands up and wants to speak and does something, whatever, loud, threatening, whatever you want, however you want to call it, who's responsible to say, hey, that's not okay, right? Or because in my opinion, for example, if someone walks up to the podium and slams their hand down on the podium, I don't think it's necessarily my place or any of our place to tell that person that that isn't acceptable, because that should be common knowledge. And if someone does that, they should be asked to leave the meeting immediately, in my opinion. I don't know how to qualify or quantify what is reasonable and rational, but an air horn, which we've had an air horn brought to meetings before and blown in Mr. Gangler's ear, I wish I could go back in time, because that person should have immediately been escorted out of the meeting, because that is behavior that's unacceptable. So I also think that, again, this is me personally, and others, if you have other opinions, I don't necessarily think, because again, we don't have to have public comment at all. I'm not convinced that we need to open public comment or allow comments from people that either aren't Grand Forks residents or at least rent property within our community. I don't know why I can't go to the Minneapolis City Council meeting and stand up and take my time, because I'm not a resident of Minneapolis. That's not how it works. So I don't know why we allow people that aren't residents, or whether they're business owners renting property or just people that are renting property that aren't necessarily residents in our community. People that are property owners or residents, meaning they're qualified electors, or they have are renting property or have businesses in our communities, those people certainly have a vested interest in how our community is run, and certainly should be welcome to come and speak. But I don't know why we would continue to allow people from, small town Minnesota or small town North Dakota or small town or big town Ohio to come to Grand Forks and comment on our dealings. So that's just my opinion. I don't know how others would feel about those sorts of changes. Mr. Bean, do you have any thoughts?
Well, maybe just a little different alignment. One of the things that I've seen over the years is not only public comments, but when you make comments, we have kind of, at least from the way I've seen a transition to not making comments, public comments at the committee meeting, but at the council meeting. I actually like it and prefer at the committee meeting, because when we have the initial presentation, we can also hear from the people on the same subject. And then you have a week between there and council to take all of that in, because if you wait to council till you see it, you're hearing it for the first time. And so for me, if that item is on the agenda, there may be a time where we could open it up for public comment on that agenda item before we move on, and then have and then I don't know what you would do at council meeting, to be honest with you, to control it, but to me, it would make for a better flow of information if we allowed that earlier rather than later.
Good idea. Mr. Weber?
Yeah, there were a couple ideas there. One was switching it from council meetings to the COW. The other was allowing citizen comments for agenda items. Would that include an open forum for citizen comments at the beginning of COW and then for agenda items as well, or only for agenda?
Only, for me, I think of only for agenda items. We want to hear people's input on the agenda items.
Ms. Osowski, did you have?
I guess the only thing that really bothered me from last week was someone bringing up one of our children, I think that's inappropriate, and I would hope that that doesn't happen anymore. Whether it be anybody's minor children, I guess. I think adults are fair game, but.
Mr. Weber, further comment?
the idea of only having citizen comments for agenda items. If someone had a comment that they want to bring to city council outside of an agenda item, when would they ever have an opportunity to make those kinds of comments?
I'm thinking out loud here, but that might happen at an actual council meeting, maybe there where it's not specific to the actual agenda. I don't know. I mean, you'd still obviously want to allow that to happen. I don't know what would be best, but you know, maybe either or. I'm not for sure one is better than the other, but it would maybe most appropriate if it's general at council.
Let me counter that. What if I really like the idea of moving citizen comments to the committee of the whole. That's when we're making the sausage. That's when we're having the discussion about ideas. And then we would have a week before we make final decision to weigh those, to consider those, for the public to give us additional feedback, etc. I'm inclined though to keep citizen comments on one night and to have, I think that there is value in having just a general open opportunity for citizen comments, but then limit people to one or the other.
I think if I could, the issue will be public hearings always occur at the city council. So there will always be a conflict there when you actually have a public hearing, but anything leading up to the public hearing could be done at committee.
So, but in general, public hearings, people limit their discussion items to the matter at hand.
In fact, public hearings give people a second bite at the apple. We often talk about that for ourselves. And I don't think legally we can restrict public comment at that time. But what we have right now are long citizen comments on city council nights during citizen comment time, opportunity for public hearing comments that almost never are taken advantage of. So I'm not concerned about giving citizens that double opportunity to speak to an item. I think that actually makes sense. But I like your idea of moving citizen comments to COW and making them relevant to agenda items. I would like the addition of more general citizen comments, but then people choose one or the other. They don't get twice in that same night. And then there's still this issue, President Sandy, about who can speak during citizen comments.
Ms. Linsky?
I also think we should discuss if we like them at the beginning, or would they be per agenda item, or would it be after? It was interesting when they were after. I think right now they get to be long, and like last week's was exhausting because it was frightening. And then you have to listen, you have to get to work after that. So I liked them after personally.
That's what we had for my first decade, was at the end, and that allowed, we had, how often do we have the Boy Scouts or some group of youth come in, and then they sit through often some, disturbing, disruptive comments. And people have the right to make those comments. I'm not interested in censoring them, but I don't think everyone should have to be dragged through that. That could be left for the end. Was there a reason, Mr. Gastead, why we moved those to the beginning instead of the end?
My memory serves me is that one of the issues was that you hear comments if it was on an agenda item, the matter had already been voted on. So the comment was too late for consideration. That was one of the issues, I think.
But Mr. Bean's suggestion of having a citizen comment opportunity for agenda items, that would solve that. Okay.
Correct.
Or
And
address that.
it's still going to have a timing issue, right? Is the way I'm understanding Councilmember Bean is he'd like to hear those comments in advance of voting on an agenda item, or at least during the COW, so that he could consider them during the COW. May not be able to react to them at the COW, but then be able to react to those comments at the city council meeting.
If we were interested in that, we could have people fill up comment cards and tell people the comment card has to be in prior to the start of the meeting. Rather than item 3.2, is there anyone here that wants to speak to it? Fill out a speaker card. And then we can, as we go through the meeting, if we have a speaker to that item, we can call the speaker.
Now, if I'm a citizen wanting to make a comment about an agenda item, what if there are 2 agenda items or 6 agenda items that I want to speak to? How do we address that?
I think if people have relevant information on multiple items, they should probably be able to speak to them.
Yeah, because I think, you know, having citizen comment is an opportunity to hear and listen. And the only way, you know, as you bring up an item, so, I mean, there's really great value in doing that. But, you know, if there's multiple, there isn't a lot of times that we have multiple bid items. I mean, there's sometimes where in a annexation or something where you have a bunch of them are kind of all linked to the same one. I think as like you, Mr. Sandy, as president, you would say, okay, these next 3 are all linked together. You know, come up, let's talk about whatever piece that you want to be a part, and then we would go ahead and do the vote individually or something like that. I mean, I think it could be managed.
If I may, this is assuming individuals with good intent that they want to contribute information to an agenda item. If we have bad actors whose intent is simply to disrupt the meeting, and they were filling out a speaker card for every agenda item, I'm concerned about that. That could be an unintended consequence of what's being suggested.
I think whoever's running the meeting would have to manage that. Right? You would have to, like today, I'm sure the mayor would use some discretion. I wouldn't mind. I'm sure any of you that were chairing a meeting would use discretion related to that.
Once again, that assumes good intent. And our current mayor, I have no doubt would do that. But I think the policies need to consider the possibility of bad actors as well. We could have a mayor who decides that they'll run the meetings and disregard all citizen comments. And that's not the intention of this discussion or our policy, as I understand it.
Mr. Gostin, I do have one additional question for you. Last week, there was a person in the audience who spoke and then went out in the hallway and used the F word towards the chief of police multiple times. In my opinion, in a very threatening manner. Of course, our chief is calm and cool, and so everything was fine. But in my opinion, well, here's a question: Do we have any say whether that person is welcome back at another meeting? At what point do people pass the line where it's okay for us to tell them, nah, you're not welcome to come back because we maintain a certain style of meeting?
Yeah, I think under those set of circumstances, I think you could, if based upon the conduct that occurred, that you heard, she witnessed during the course of the meeting. It's rises to the level of, did that rise to the level of disorderly conduct or not? That's obviously a discretionary decision by the officer that is subjected to that and witnessing that type of conduct. But you start with the premise that this is your meeting. Citizens get to watch, to perform your work. And it's not, there isn't an absolute, you know, I hear the notion that there's an absolute First Amendment right to come up and speak, and there isn't. The law is fairly clear on that. But once you open it up, then there are some First Amendment rights that give rise to that, and you can't cut people off because of what they may say. You may disagree with them, but it's not a basis to prevent them from speaking, or even everybody has to have some thick skin as council members. But again, comments about children or your children, your spouses, that's not, I don't think, within the realm of First Amendment right. And to answer your question, if there is conduct that is disorderly, the presiding officer can remove those people. And I think under those set of circumstances, you can preclude those people from speaking for a period of time because of the conduct that they witnessed.
Mr. Venus?
Sandy, you started out by saying, comparing us to the other cities, our major cities. It'd be interesting to see what the other major cities are, because what I was told, at least from one of them, that they have 30 minutes, 3 minutes each. That's it for their council meetings. So I don't know. We're way wide.
Yeah, I think when we changed from after to the beginning and from 3 minutes to 5 minutes, Mr. Gostet provided us a summary of the other cities. So I know it's been a while. I don't remember what they are either. I was considering going back and trying to find that so that I could refresh myself. I didn't have a chance to do that going into this meeting. Yeah. Yeah, Mr. Weber.
And what does the law say about threatening behavior, or even threatening speech?
Well, threatening behavior, it can rise to the level of, is that disorderly conduct or not? In fact, our policy does state that the presiding officer, if he believes that there is disorderly conduct, can first ask the person to stop that type of conduct, and if it continues, then ask to be removed. So I think the point you made, Mr. Sandy, is when is that, when is the disorderly conduct enough to have him removed? Is it the instance of slamming the hand down like we witnessed last week? I agree with you. I think you're at that point, except that our policy said stop that first, and then if you continue, then we'll so if you're gonna take action, then you maybe remove that qualifier, is that if the presiding officer determines that there is disorderly conduct, that he can ask that person be removed from the meeting without a first ball, so to speak, as we don't do this anymore.
I think this has been a good discussion. Should we ask that this be on the next city council meeting for further discussion, or the next committee of the whole?
About the next committee of the whole.
Next committee of the whole, great. We can actually put it on the agenda for discussion.
If I can, yeah, we did do a memo on this, actually about the time that the policy, kind of outlining the issues and what, across the country, some of those, because there's been cases that give rise to the First Amendment challenge, at city council meetings. So I'll share that with the council members so you can review it. Kind of gives you plain language type of analysis as to what's acceptable from a council standpoint and what can be done to rein in what would otherwise be disorderly conduct.
Thank you, Mr. Gostet. And share that. Yes, Mr. Weber.
Yeah, so instead of us digging and trying to refine that, if that could be sent out, that'd be great. Additionally, if I could offer a proposed summary, what I'm hearing is consideration of moving citizen comments from council to committee of the whole, moving them to agenda items to make them more agenda item specific. Consideration of who who we consider to be a citizen of Grand Forks, and then possibly something in addition about threatening or disruptive behavior. And I believe strongly that this conversation and our past actions indicate an absolute interest in hearing from citizens, to include their voices in our deliberations and our consideration.
Good summary, Mr. Weber. Anyone else have any comments, Ms. Suski?
I agree with making like some changes about talking about the children. You know, as for flip-flopping things around, we just did that. You know, we just voted on that, what, 7 months ago? It wasn't a year ago. It was when I was on the council, I think, that we changed that. And so I just feel like it doesn't make us look great when every time we run into an instance, we go and try to change things up and switch them around. I understand the policies about, the children and acceptable behavior, but to just go and, change, we're replacing the comments and things like that. I just think it makes us look kind of bad.
Squatter?
My sense of Mr. Vian's suggestion was that it would give citizen comments an opportunity to be more relevant to specific items. Rather than a restriction, it gives, it actually raises the relevance of those citizen comments. That was my sense of his comment.
Good. Sabine, anything else?
No, well, that was my intent. When the citizens are here and, if maybe somebody who has just an issue with a curb inlet or something, they want to be, you put it on the agenda, you want them to be able to sit down and talk directly to you about the issue of their input. And when they're done, they leave. They come, and do their thing, and or if they want, they can obviously stay. But it helps them make the conversation more relevant to the item that's on.
Mr. Bean.
One quick comment. Sorry, I just like to agree with Councilmember Osowski, and we just voted on it to change things. I think moving it to the beginning of council and allowing 5 minutes has been, I think, a positive thing for citizen comment. I'm curious, I know that there's guidelines, Mr. Gosted, but do we have a code of conduct or public meeting decorum so that it's not gray? Is any of that spelled out in our code?
Not with the level of specificity that I think you're looking for. We've got the disorderly conduct type of ordinances, and it's, you kind of have to see it. You know it when you see it, when it occurs. I saw it last Monday.
Sure.
I don't know if anybody else did, but I saw that last Monday with some of the tactics.
Well, and I would agree. I think that when we talk about, do we allow them to talk on this topic or that topic or combine them? I think the more gray we have, and the more opportunity we have for, creating inequity with how we treat citizens. I feel like the 5 minutes at the beginning of council meetings is equitable for anyone to come up and speak about any of the topics that are important to them. And I also think that changing things again, especially after any incidents that might happen, I think it just seems like we're going against the trend versus trying to help things. But I do think that we should have a decorum. We should have a very clear state of rules that we're expected to hold ourselves to, and we'd expect others to.
Thank you, Mr. Kavami. Mr. Weber?
Mr. Kavami, Mr. Osowski, there was also the discussion about who is a citizen, who's eligible for citizen comments. Any thoughts there from either?
I don't have a strong thought other than I think right now allowing anyone to speak. I don't think that should be changed, I guess.
I agree with Mr. Kavami.
Motion adjournment. Moved by Osowski, second by Weber. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Once it's been said.